Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. So I'm here with Aya Sobana, and my name is Bhante Sudaso, and this is our weekly monk chat session, your opportunity to ask questions about Buddhism, and our opportunity to try to provide helpful replies. So you're welcome to type in questions at any time into the comments section, and we'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then we'll go through the questions. And once we finish the questions, then we'll conclude the session. So as long as you keep providing questions, we'll keep providing answers, and then we'll finish when it's all concluded. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So first of all, hello to the people checking in online. Hello to Evgeny, Elaine, Diane, Lydia, Rick, Nirmala, Moraya, Maria, Eric, other Eric, Jayanta, Mary, Yankee, and everyone else who's watching. So we have a couple questions here already. We have a question here from Lydia. Lydia says, in what way can we train in metta to help prevent future ill will from arising, or train in general to prevent ill will?
We could spend the whole hour speaking about this topic, since ill will is such a common problem. I know in the Visuddhimagga there's probably about 5 or 6 pages of detailed examples and metaphors of different ways to think about the difficult person in order to talk your way out of feeling ill will for them and to develop compassion. So the practice of metta is a powerful prevention for ill will to arise again in the future. In order to have kindness and compassion for a difficult person, it's best to start with the type of person who's lovable, or a thought or an image that helps to stir up the emotion of kindness, empathy, appreciation, and so forth. And then having developed some momentum with this practice of loving kindness, then bring in that difficult person without being distracted by their story. That's the main problem with those bad people, is that we start thinking about or reacting, if only they would get rid of their bad qualities, then they would be happy. And I would be happy, and I wouldn't be have a will towards them again. So just without thinking about their qualities, just bring that kind of person, or that individual person, if there's somebody who arouses ill will, and practice kindness, practice loving kindness towards that person. If you feel irritated towards somebody, and nevertheless you will speak to them in a courteous, considerate, and polite way, or do some small kindness towards them, even though it could seem like it's a bit of a phony, because your emotions are going one way, but you're intentionally choosing to behave in a different way with your speech and your actions. Give yourself credit that you are intentionally extending kindness towards a difficult person, and focus on that, and that goes a long way to overcoming the habit of ill will. as I said, there's many tips that could be brought out for this.
Good. Okay, thank you. And Nirmala says, how will be subtle feelings? I'm not quite sure what you're asking here, Nirmala. Maybe try to rephrase that in a bit more detail. And we have a question here. Lydia says, how do you feel the precepts help you train your mind? Well, this actually is a really important point, which is the precepts, well, first off, on their surface, the precepts actually do serve a very important basic function, which is helping us to avoid some of the most extreme unwholesome behaviors. So that is not to be overlooked. That is actually really important. On a more subtle level, the precepts are training us to constantly watch what we're doing and what we're saying. And more importantly, to constantly watch the impulses in the mind to act or speak. Because the precepts are all about refraining from doing certain things, refraining from acting or speaking in particular ways. Well, in order to stop yourself from acting or speaking, you have to be very clearly aware of all of the impulses and urges arising in your mind. So that requires a fairly refined and constant mindfulness of mind. So training in the precepts, at the beginning, it's just about not doing bad things. But as you continue training in the precepts, you start to become increasingly aware of more and more subtle and refined layers of mind. As you start to catch the impulses towards unwholesome behavior arising in the mind, in the beginning, right before you act on them, actually in the beginning, usually after we act on them. Usually we catch ourselves doing something bad and then we're like, oh, oops, there's a precept about this, I need to be more careful. And in the future, we catch ourselves right before. So when the impulse is already extremely strong in the mind. But as you continue practicing with precepts, continue practicing with moral behavior, then you'll start to notice those impulses much earlier, when they're much more subtle in the mind. And when you're catching them when they're much more subtle, well, first of all, they're much easier to stop, much easier to restrain and control. But it's also teaching you to develop an incredibly subtle, refined, and precise awareness of mind, which then is extremely important in the cultivation of wisdom. So this incredibly refined mindfulness of mind then helps us to identify not just the root causes of precept breaking, but all the root causes of unwholesome thoughts and behaviors. And ultimately also it helps us to identify the constant reification of self-identity, which is constantly going on at a subtle level in the mind. So practicing with the precepts then, it helps us to develop this extremely subtle, refined and precise awareness of the deeper layers of the mind. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Okay. And Moraya says, is the only type of discernment which leads to the destruction of defilements and cutting fetters insight into the three characteristics? If so, how is that insight developed? What do you think?
Okay, that insight into the three characteristics is very frequently mentioned as so it's in the top level of kinds of discernment that are beneficial in this way. The second major kind of discernment is understanding the actual nature of these five aggregates and getting away from the false view of identifying your personality or self with the five aggregates. So that's a second major contemplation to do. And then the Four Noble Truths by themselves is a kind of a discernment. The Four Noble Truths is a little bit larger. It's then just a discernment because it's also a summary of the whole path of practice. But being able to consistently see dukkha, see the cause of dukkha, and to directly experience whenever one abandons that craving or attachment and experience some measure of relief from dukkha, from that letting go. That's another important type of discernment that should be developed. So I think those three are all really valuable.
Okay. And Maria further says, if not, can you please explain what is meant by discernment? Yeah, I think you cleared that up. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Ryan says, Dear Aya, would love to hear how you overcame drinking, please.
Okay. Well, I don't want to get too much into my drunkalogue. It's a special art form. It's very amusing. But that's on a certain occasion, I had a spiritual awakening. This was a couple of years before I stopped drinking, when I realized that I was killing myself. And at that particular moment, my addiction to cigarettes was lifted completely in a moment and never returned. Then a couple of years after that, because of a very humorous story that I won't get into, I was in therapy, and my therapist got a tip that I might have a drinking problem and gave me the quiz and directed me to get into the recovery program on the threat of having my therapy cut off if I didn't comply. So that was that. I will say that I know that in the Dhamma we're addicted to craving, and this process of craving and clinging, of proliferation of unwholesome thoughts, is very much like a general theory of a general experience of addiction. And I know for sure that this brain, without consuming any substance or engaging in any particular kind of activity, this brain is capable of spacing out and going over to La La Land in order to escape from something unpleasant. So I have a slogan for myself, which is, I must be present to win. So I have to stay present. I can't afford to go and into any kind of escapism. And so this 8-step program that we're in here is the one that teaches me how to stay present.
Good. Okay. And they seem to want to ask you questions today. So Ryan says, Dear Aya, in your knowledge, would you say dreaming about meeting the Buddha has any significance in our practice?
It might. I think that Buddha does not particularly respect dreams in the suttas or in the early Buddhist texts. I don't see any evidence of appreciating the meaning of dreams, but at the same time, I have had the experience, and I know that many people have, that at significant turning points of our development along this path are at times of being on retreat when the usual distractions are set aside. It does sometimes happen that dreams come along, which are, it's like part of a contemplation, and it's a way that we tell ourselves in a symbolic or story form something that we need to know, or something, some realization. So it's like the Dhamma that you discover for yourself and that you know directly through your own experience, even if it's not exactly matching the way things are laid out in the early text, it could be that your way of understanding your situation is just the medicine that you need right now to move yourself along to the next level. And so those understandings, I call them like tricks, that you use to help yourself to do what you should do along this path of practice, is perfectly good, including ideas that come to you because of dreams.
Okay. And Lydia says, which sutta speaks about dealing with difficult people? There's many suttas, but I assume you referred to a specific one.
Well, I was referring to the Visuddhimagga, which is the commentarial text that has a chapter on summarizing different suttas about difficult people.
Yeah, there's also a number of places in the suttas where the topic is touched on, but I'd have to find the references. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
We have a recommendation, yes?
Anguttara Nikaya 10.79.
You have a recommendation in Anguttara Nikaya 10.79 and 80. I don't remember what those suttas are, but you can look them up. Okay. And Elaine says, Venerable Ayasobana, in your talk this morning you mentioned that Vipassana is not a meditation technique, it is the result of Samadhi. Can you please clarify on this?
As I understand it, Vipassana belongs within the threefold training of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, that Vipassana belongs to the group of wisdom. So the wisdom, seeing things as they actually are, and the subsequent levels of coming out of different kinds of delusions, letting go of different kinds of delusions, is all within the section on wisdom. And Vipassana, as it's given in the early Buddhist text, is part of wisdom. Now, the technique of meditation, like when you're doing mindfulness and you direct your mind to observe the arising and the cessation of the phenomena that you're looking at when you're doing the satipatthana, that is a meditation technique that is expected to lead to vipassana, to wisdom. And the same way, if you're in practicing samadhi and you experience the bliss of being secluded from unwholesome states, and you know what you're practicing, you have the clarity about what the state of mind is, in samadhi is leading to wisdom. And then if you're practicing samadhi and either within or upon emerging from blissful samadhi meditation, when you have the certain knowledge that that meditation is conditioned, impermanent, subject to dukkha, and not self, that is a wisdom that is directly expected to be a result of samadhi, which is vipassana.
Yeah, there's also many places in the suttas where the Buddha quite directly states that the mind which is in samadhi knows and sees things as they are, knows and sees things accurately. So there's innumerable places throughout the suttas where the Buddha explains how samadhi is a necessary precondition for deep insight. The more stable the mind is, the more the mind is capable of observing clearly and precisely. It's just like when you're taking a photo. If you hold your camera very still, then you can get a very clear and precise photo. Whereas if your camera is constantly jerking and shaking around, then your photographs will always be blurry and unclear. Well, it's the same with our mind. If our mind is constantly jerking and shaking around, then we're never going to see reality clearly. It's always going to be distorted and blurry. We're always going to have a mistaken perception of reality. So Eric says, did the Buddha speak on or give advice about discernment when accessing higher states of consciousness? Well, Eric, you'll need to talk about what you mean by higher states of consciousness, because the closest term that we have in the suttas is adhicitta. So adhicitta literally means the higher mind, or you could translate that higher state of consciousness if you want to. But adhicitta is always defined as referring to samadhi, as referring to states of jhana, as referring to when the mind is completely stabilized, unified, settled, bright, alert, aware, then that's called adhicitta, a higher state of mind. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what people often mean these days when they say higher state of consciousness. Often when people are talking about elevated consciousness or higher states of consciousness, they're often talking about altered states of mind, which may or may not have anything to do with what the Buddha is talking about. So the Buddha is talking about altering our state of mind in a very specific way, which is the cultivation of stability and clarity, which doesn't normally produce any kind of fantastical or far out spiritual or psychic experiences. In fact, it's more about developing the ability to clearly and precisely see mundane reality without distortion, which is not necessarily particularly exciting. But it is what's necessary in order to break our delusion cycles and attain awakening. So maybe, Eric, if you explain a bit more what you mean by higher states of consciousness, then we can give a better reply. So Maraya says, if using samadhi to lead to discernment, will the mind naturally access this discernment when it's ready, or does the meditator need to switch over to look for the three characteristics?
In my understanding, outside of meditation or preliminary to meditation, there's a type of contemplative practice or pondering, reflecting, using the thought process to think about what we can understand about the three characteristics. And that, in a way, sets up those concepts in the mind and prepares the mind so that then the phenomenon that we can see in meditation can arise naturally. So in that way, it's not a question of switching, practicing samadhi, and then switching to think about what we experienced in samadhi to see whether three characteristics were visible or not. It is said on many times in the suttas that the meditator can choose to direct the mind towards a particular concept. Like they could choose to direct the mind towards nibbana, or to direct the mind towards seeing impermanence. So it's possible to direct the mind within or just on emerging from meditation, but I would not suggest anything as mechanical as like switching over to look at the characteristics. You may have a different idea about that.
I think there's different ways of approaching it. I mean, the Buddha does talk about the cultivation of anicca sanya, dukkha sanya, anatta sanya. And in particular, he talks a lot about anicca sanya and anatta sanya in various ways. And I do think that there can be value to making a deliberate switch in the mind. It's like, well, up till now I've been cultivating serenity and alertness, and now I want to deliberately put attention on observing impermanence, observing the constant change of things. So I do think there does need to be some deliberate transition there. But also, as Ayasobana was saying, if we condition the mind beforehand with the intellectual knowledge or consideration of the reality of impermanence, then when we're practicing meditation, then the mind will naturally be preconditioned to notice it. So this also is one of the things about the Buddha's teachings, is that it's all stuff which is actually really obvious once you know it already. Like, once you know everything is impermanent and constantly changing, then you'll start seeing that everywhere. And it becomes obvious, it becomes inescapable. But if you don't already have that concept, then the mind will actually default to the opposite, which is constantly assuming that reality is composed of stable, ongoing, persistent objects and phenomena. So to some degree, as we cultivate intellectual right view, then the mind will start to naturally observe the reality of that right view. And therefore will start to naturally confirm through experiential understanding, it will start to naturally experientially confirm the intellectual right view that we've cultivated. But sometimes it actually is really helpful. So especially there's some people who they have a strong tendency towards samadhi, towards stillness of mind, serenity of mind. And sometimes when they practice meditation, they just want to stay in stillness and serenity of mind. So then having that bit of an actual willful effort of like, okay, now I'm going to observe impermanence, can help to make sure that there is a wisdom component being involved there. So I do think there's value to both approaches. So both towards conditioning the mind outside of meditation practice to observe the characteristics, and also to deliberately switching the mind. And I think it depends a little bit on each particular person as to what's going to be helpful or relevant to them. I have personally found that deliberately switching to anicca sanya is sometimes really helpful. Especially when the mind is feeling a bit dull or lazy, then kind of that deliberate switch often perks it up a bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Or if somebody becomes attached to the bliss of samadhi in order to break that attachment.
Yeah. Yeah, or in that case, observing the dukkha characteristic. It's recognizing that that bliss state is itself temporary and unreliable.
Right.
Okay, so Victoria says, do you have any advice for staying calm and present when helping loved ones with tasks that may feel overwhelming or pointless as spiritual development advances? What do you think?
Right. I think what this means is that people who are have not yet realized that the gain of stability, tranquility, equanimity as a result of these practices, then can be very anxious, disturbed, and fretted, and worried about things that are actually not important and not worth worrying about. And yet their emotions can be stressful. So then it's the thing that it makes it difficult is picking up emotional contagion from other people's worries and anxiety. And the thing that is the cure is to understand very thoroughly your own emotional reactivity so that you can get out of that picking up the contagion and letting other people's feelings affect you. So if you went to a doctor and you were seriously ill and the doctor became all stressed and sad and was anxious because you were sick, that would interfere. They wouldn't be able to be a very good doctor. But if the doctor knows the answer to your illness, he or she could be really cheerful and says, yes, you have a very serious illness, but we know what to do about it. And so that's kind of the attitude that you would like to have towards people who are disturbed and anxious because they've not yet found out the answer.
Okay. We have a question here from Madeline who says, how do you know if you are on the right path in terms of career, meditation? Well, in terms of career, the basic thing to look for is, are you causing any harm to any sentient being? And that includes yourself, by the way. If you are, then you're on the wrong track and you need to switch around, do something different, or change how you're doing what you're doing. And the other thing to look for is, are you helping any sentient being? Are you helping them to be happier? Are you helping them to be wiser? Are you helping them to be better people? If so, great, keep doing that. And actually see what you can do to emphasize that, to increase that. So one important thing to consider with career, which often does get kind of overlooked, is to always consider what effect it has on yourself. So if you're working a job which is theoretically blameless, but is making you really stressed out, then that's a problem. Or if you're working a lot of long hours and it leaves it so you have very little time for studying the suttas and practicing meditation, well, that's also a problem. Or if your job leaves you very tired and worn out, so again, you feel drained and lacking the energy to practice Buddhism when you're off work, again, that's a problem. So we should always be relating to our career as an extension of our Buddhist practice. And we should always be evaluating it in terms of how it affects our Buddhist practice and whether or not it allows us to continue cultivating wholesome qualities and engaging in wholesome activities. As for meditation, gauging whether you're on the right path in terms of meditation, basically, over a period of time, is the mind becoming more peaceful? Is your awareness, your mindfulness becoming sharper and clearer? Are you becoming more patient, more tolerant, and more kind? These are all good indications that you're on the right path. So if over time you notice you're getting more spacey and more grumpy, probably not on the right track. Probably good to go to an experienced monk and ask for some advice. They might be able to give you some recommendations. Okay. MC says, I tried staying at a monastery once, but was thrown off by some of the monks' behaviors. I felt like they had sort of an arrogant attitude at times and acted in very unusual ways I found jarring. Is this typical?
So there are ways that monk life is different from the ordinary lifestyle of people, in particular with respect to the mistakes and faults. We are trained in a really strong way to acknowledge our faults and to, if we see that somebody else has got a fault, it's considered a great kindness to point it out to them. And within the monk culture, that can be done in a way which is much more direct than what people are used to. So that would be an example of what could seem to be an arrogant kind of behavior. So I would counsel being patient and but understanding really the monks have undertaken a life which is different than the life of a layperson. And so it could sometimes seem to be odd or seem to be even arrogant. We have some monks who are very like warm and they're flowing with loving kindness, and you just feel so happy and delighted and good when you see them. And then there are other monks who are still good monks, who are more cool or more withdrawn or more distant. And it doesn't mean that they're bad monks. You should still really make the effort with an open mind to listen to what the monk has to tell you, and to try out whatever Dhamma they have to tell you, or whatever advice they have to give.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important to recognize that as one commits fully and completely to the Buddhist teachings and practices, then one's system of values starts to change. And things which are very important to ordinary lay people are just really not important to monks for the most part. And things which are very important to monks might seem kind of trivial to lay people, especially if they're not well versed in Buddhism. So again, I second what Ayasobomana is saying. Keep an open mind and investigate, and it's also good to ask questions. Like ask, what is the underlying Dhamma principle behind this? How do the teachings of the Buddha reflect in life at the monastery? So as you ask questions with a sincere, investigating, open mind, then you might find that there's actually good reasons for the things that you're seeing. That said, it's also important to keep in mind that the vast majority of monks are not fully enlightened. The vast majority of monks still have some residual defilements and delusions. So sometimes monks also act in ways which are not quite perfect. So you also need to be a little bit patient and forgiving, just as you wish for other people to be patient and forgiving with you. Okay, and then Ryan says, I took on your advice of focusing on the feet movements while trekking and sauntering. Focus was instantly, however, fleeting. Do you have tips for maintaining the focus, please? Yes, keep doing it. Keep practicing. Also do a lot of walking meditation. Do standing meditation. So as you keep practicing walking meditation and standing meditation, then when you're out hiking, then it will be easier for you to practice mindfulness of the body by focusing on your feet. So just keep training in that method and it becomes increasingly easy. Actually, I would say one of the huge problems in a lot of, particularly lay practitioners, is a excessive focus on the sitting posture to the point where they never develop any skill in the meditation postures of walking meditation and standing meditation. So it's very important to cultivate the other postures as well. And Rick says, Aya, can you talk about practicing when you have complex PTSD? When trauma is triggered, it can overwhelm my mind. When should we stay mindful, and when should we use skillful means to calm the mind?
My knowledge of PTSD is shallow, but I'll give a general answer. When we know, let's put it this way. It's because of causes and conditions that sometimes one is triggered and the reactivity comes up, and we're not able to, in the moment, to control those reactions. We're not able, just in the moment, to abandon or let go of something that could be an unskillful reaction because the trauma has been activated. So in a case like that, a very compassionate thought is to realize this is just arising because of causes and conditions. This is not me, it's not mine, it's not myself, and also this is not permanent. And to then just patiently bear with the unpleasantness of those reactions, and then at the same time becoming willing to acknowledge that those strong reactions actually are unskillful. And it could seem like very cruel and not compassionate, like an arrogant monk to say, well, your traumatic reaction is unskillful, you should let it go. This happens when people are in grief. When they're in the early stages of grief, then most common people just say, just let your emotions flow out and just be with it and just allow all your emotional reactions, and that's the way to take care of yourself. Whereas in the Buddhist teaching, grief is not classified as a skillful state. It's classified as an unskillful state. So then, if you're bearing up to the unskillful states that are still arising within you, with compassion towards yourself, knowing it's because of causes and conditions, but you're willing to let go, and you're looking for the way how to let go. This is actually a very long road it can be to find out how to let go, or how to prevent particular kinds of reactions from coming along, or how to release those reactions when they do come along. So that's your project. It's part of a right effort, is learning how, and then practicing to let go of the unskillful states when they arise, including those reactions.
Okay, and Toma says, should a person first secure the land and lay the groundwork to create a community and monastery, and then become a monastic, or is the order of events different? I'm reminded of the old saying, putting the cart before the horse. So Toma, there's two separate things. One is the very meritorious activity of a layperson who wants to offer land for a monastery. That's a great thing for a layperson to do. And then the other thing is a person who wants to become a monastic. So I think the important thing is to ask yourself what you actually want to do. Do you want to be a layperson that offers monastery property to the Sangha? Or do you want to become a member of the monastic Sangha? Pick one of those two things and do that thing. So if you want to become a monastic, just start going and staying in monasteries and focus on developing the necessary requisites to become a monastic. You don't have to build monasteries, you don't have to acquire property, you don't have to go through any of that. There's lots of monasteries already in the world. There's lots of great monasteries in the world, lots of great teachers in the world. You don't need to create a new monastery. If that's something you want to do, then you do it as the meritorious act of a layperson offering something to the world. That's great. Doing it as a monastic, and I say this as somebody who's been involved in creating a couple of monasteries at this point, it's quite an involved activity. And it really is not something that I recommend for someone who's in the early stages of monastic life. Unless you're guided by a more senior monastic who knows what they're doing. So if you want to become a monastic, just do that. Don't worry about trying to acquire land and start a monastery.
But if there's no monasteries and no monks in the country where you live, then it does sometimes happen that sooner rather than later, that you have to find a place to live. Hopefully one would be under the care of an experienced, high-quality senior teaching monk for the first number of years of your monastic life. But then in the modern world, it sometimes happens that you're thrown off while still a young monastic. And in that case, just keep it as simple as possible. Just keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, and keeping an ongoing relationship with senior monastics, even remotely, is really important in those cases. And Emo says, what is the responsibility of monks when it comes to things like building or renovating a monastery? Zero. Absolutely none. But sometimes we choose to do these things as part of our practice, but we have no responsibility around these things. Our only responsibility is to follow the Buddhist teachings. So if we choose to help with maintaining properties and so on as a gift to our fellow Sangha members, sometimes we do that, but we're not obligated to. It's not a requirement. And Emo says, if monks are not allowed to touch or handle money, how is it possible for them to fund or manage the changes and construction of a monastery?
Not possible. It is, however, true that building a kuti is something that a monk is allowed to do. Practicing agriculture, which would include killing insects, is something that is definitely beyond the pale for monastics to do. So you would not, in the Theravada tradition, you would not find monks establishing a farm. You wouldn't find monks establishing a beef cattle industry farm, something like that. That would be completely beyond the pale. But then being involved in fixing up a building or repairing a building and things like that, that is within something that monks are allowed to do. But then the money side of it, the only thing that monks can do is to try to be a good monk and to speak about the teachings of the Buddha, and then it's possible that lay people would like to help with creating monasteries.
Yeah, generally speaking, monasteries where the money rules are followed strictly, such as this one, there are lay people, usually committees of lay people, which help with managing the finances of the monastery so that the monks don't have to be directly involved in those things. And Emo says, is it a problem to become a monk without believing in reincarnation? Yes, that's a problem. Usually we use the word rebirth for various reasons, but briefly speaking, the Buddha spoke about the primal importance of right view. Right view is the fundamental basis of progress in Buddhism. And one of the critical pieces of right view is the teachings on karma and rebirth. So if one does not accept those teachings, if one is not open to even the possibility of those teachings, then it is extremely difficult to make progress in Buddhist practice. So if someone's a bit doubtful about karma and rebirth, well, you should be open to the possibility that maybe it's true, that maybe the Buddha knew what he was talking about. But if you've already decided that rebirth is definitely not true, then Buddhism is not for you. There might be bits and pieces that will help you, but I would not recommend monastic life for someone who's chosen to reject the teachings on rebirth. Those are my thoughts anyway. You might have a different view.
It could be that you can't see it yet, and that's a feature of our culture because we live in the age of science and age of skepticism. If you can't yet fully see it, be patient and keep practicing. And actually, one of the features of Samadhi and the wisdom that arises from Samadhi is being able to directly see and understand in an authentic, direct way about karma and rebirth. So it may be that is something that would come for you later, and it's quite a big step away from modern culture.
And Eric says, any advice on how to remain present when the mind goes to escapism? What do you think?
Make more effort, be determined. This is a chance to be a little bit hard on yourself and make a strong resolve to come out of those states as soon as you can. Resolve with compassion for yourself, but still making a really strong resolve not to waste time that way. Escapism is like a very deceptive and tricky, and it seems to be pleasant, but it's really harmful. So you can, it's very easy to fool yourself or delude yourself. So this is the one case where I think using willpower is good. Then mindfulness, practicing the satipatthana is a good way, is the technique.
And Emo says, is an Anagarika considered a layperson, or is this a distinct stage of monastic training? Well, technically speaking, the word Anagarika means a homeless person, and in the suttas it's actually used to mean monks. But these days the word Anagarika is commonly used to refer to a layperson who follows the 8 precepts, which include some renunciation practices like not eating after noon, not using jewelry and makeup and perfume and so on. And normally they wear white robes or white clothing, and commonly this is an initial stage of training prior to monastic ordination. So if we want to be precise about this, monastic ordination begins with samanera or samaneri, so novice ordination. So from that perspective, an Anagarika is not officially a monastic in the sense of the original monastic code. But these days it's very common to have this period of initial training, which we call Anagarika. But it's different in different monasteries. Some monasteries don't have an Anagarika training. Other monasteries, it's very precise and formal and has very specific details and steps. So there's a fair amount of variety around different practices in different monasteries around this. Okay. And Emo says, regarding the duties of an Anagarika, I have a concern I hope you can address. If I am accepted into the community, will I be expected to assent to every request made by the senior monastics?
We don't take a vow of obedience, so you would be expect to assent to the teachings of the Buddha and to the precepts of the morality and the right view of the Buddha, and to do your utmost to really purify your morality and to be as perfect as you can be. Then serving the senior monastics is part of the training, which has to do with softening your egotism and selfishness. And some communities are more hierarchical and expecting a lot of service like that, and other places are more egalitarian. But being able to, even though, you know, like you're being a modern person, you've got a certain amount of sense of equality. Being I'm equal to everybody else and I'm not lower than somebody. So the fact of being the lower person on the totem pole as an Anagarika is part of breaking that equality conceit.
Yeah, and the other thing is to, if you are asked to do something, first ask yourself, is this directly contrary to the teachings of the Buddha? Like if the senior monk says, oh, can you go next door and shoot the neighbor? Then you're like, okay, this is directly contrary to the teachings of the Buddha. I probably shouldn't do this. But if they're asking you to do something more general that isn't directly contrary to the Buddha's teachings, you should instead ask yourself, why am I resistant to doing this? Like if the senior monk says, oh, can you go sweep the porch? And you're like, but I don't want to. Do I have to obey? Well, stop and look at your mind. Why am I so resistant to this? This is not evil. This is not opposed to the Buddhist teachings. So why am I resistant to it? And in investigating that, you might discover something about yourself and something about why you're not enlightened yet. And then you'll go and sweep the porch, ideally. Okay, and Mo then also says, I worry that my time might be entirely consumed by work, leaving me little opportunity to cultivate my practice in meditation and the study of the suttas. Would it be appropriate for me to respectfully ask for sufficient time to devote to my spiritual development, or would expressing this need jeopardize my standing within the Sangha?
Right, so meritorious service to the community is a big part of the practice of being an Anagarika. So very often there is a pretty high percentage of work, and if it's something that's good, that's not harmful, then it's better to get over that resistance. At the same time, if you have if you need time to take care of your personal practice, discuss that with the monk who's training you. Yeah.
And Victoria says, do different monasteries have different guidelines for long-term guests for the winter retreat? I'm planning on being on the west coast of the US for the winter and love to plan a visit if able. So Victoria, every monastery is different. So you need to contact the individual monasteries and ask them. So some monasteries have very strict rules around guests during certain times of the year and others don't. So contact the monasteries you're interested in and ask them what their policies are. So the Buddhist world is incredibly varied. There's a lot of variety in how different monasteries do things and how different monasteries schedule things. So it's ultimately you develop a personal relationship with a number of different monasteries, and you'll discover for yourself what places are suitable for your particular practice. And Julie says, what is the cause for restlessness in the stage just before becoming an arhat, if not of greed nor anger, since these are already eradicated in the third stage of enlightenment? Okay, Sopna.
So the noble disciple has not yet realized Nibbana, and they feel that longing for the completion of the path. So it's the wanting, the completion of the path that creates that restlessness. But if you want it, you can't get it. So you've got to stop wanting Nibbana, but instead just practice and allow nature to take its course. So that's the final restlessness as I understand it.
Yeah. Okay, and Shoshomi says, how can I skillfully tell a family member that their actions are hurtful, but repeatedly ignore the words and continue to do so anyways? Well, the first thing that I would really encourage you to do is to look at your own mind. One of the things the Buddha says is that before we criticize someone else, we should first establish ourselves in 5 things. So we should first ask ourselves, first off, is it true? And this is already quite important because often our perception of the situation is distorted by personal preference or personal bias. So ask ourselves, is it really true? And really try to make our evaluation of the situation as objectively true as possible. Second, we should ask ourselves, is it actually beneficial? Like, is it actually beneficial for me to bring this up to this person? Third, we should ask ourselves, when is the right time? So also considering the time and place and circumstances for bringing things up. So trying to find a time and a place and a circumstance where the other person is more likely to be receptive. The fourth one is to make the commitment that I will speak gently, not harshly. And this is quite challenging because if we're annoyed and irritated by someone's behavior, then even if beforehand we're like, I'm going to tell them skillfully, in the actual moment we might find ourselves speaking forcefully or harshly or rudely or abruptly. So we need to watch for that. And the fifth one that the Buddha says is we should check to see, am I speaking with any kind of aversion or hostility in my mind? So this is actually quite subtle because, again, often we're like, I want to tell this person about their actions, but you look at your mind and you're like, wow, there actually is a little bit of anger or hatred in my mind. So you really want to purify your own mind before you speak to that person, because if you have any kind of irritation or hostility or anger lingering in your mind when you speak to them, again, it's going to poison your words. And the other person might feel that, which will make them less receptive to what you're saying. So these are what I'd really recommend is, again, the Buddha gives some quite useful advice on this one. And often what winds up happening is you wind up just not talking to the person about the issue. Because you run through this and you're like, okay, actually my perception is a bit distorted and I'm not really sure it would really be helpful to bring this up, and I actually am really annoyed at them, and it's like, well then, okay, what do you need to do? You need to practice loving kindness, you need to practice patience, you need to practice serenity, work on purifying your own heart. And once you've purified your own heart sufficiently, then maybe you can approach that person and address them about what's going on. Do you have any other thoughts on this?
Even if you were perfect on all 5 of those points in speaking to this difficult family member, they still might not agree with you and might not change themselves in the way that you're requesting. So you've got to be prepared in advance that you've done your duty by advising them for their benefit of something that they're doing that's harmful. But you're not depending on getting a particular answer from them, a particular result from them. If you're able to not be trying to manipulate to get an answer, it's possible that the advice that you give is not accepted at the moment, but it could be that the person might pick it up and be able to consider it later on. So you just, as it's called, I think, staying on your own side of the tennis court or something. You do your part, but you can't control the other person's reaction.
Yeah. And Mariah says, how would you address the feeling of wasting your time when practicing mindfulness of breathing and experiencing calm and tranquility? I often feel like it's leading nowhere, although it is pleasant. Well, the thing is that cultivating calm and tranquility are reconditioning the mind, which then makes the mind more steady and stable, which then in the future will lead to the mind being more sharp and clear and more readily able to see reality on reality's own terms. So calm and tranquility are necessary components of the path. So if you're cultivating those qualities, then you're cultivating the necessary components of the path. So they're not in and of themselves sufficient, but they are part of the overall package of necessary qualities. Okay, and Mo says, should a layperson witness behavior by a monk that appears to contradict the 9 special qualities of the Sangha? Don't actually remember that list off the top of my head. Anyway, is it permissible? And if so, how is it done appropriately for the layperson to draw attention to the potential lapse in discipline? Is it okay for the layperson to say something to the badly behaved monk about it? If so, what is the best and most respectful way to do so? Yeah?
This very often happened during the lifetime of the Buddha, that some monk behaved in a way that was upsetting or not pleasing to lay people, and the lay people could say, "How could those monks do such and such?" And they would complain about it. Very often they would go and complain to the Buddha about it, So it's the same guideline for the 5 criteria for skillful speech, to speak directly to a monk whose behavior seems to be improper, and would be good to do, and you could be surprised and find that the monk has the training in how to receive such a criticisms, and you get a very good example of a monk who's able to hear those kinds of advices. But if it's something that's pressing that you want to address, but you cannot speak directly to that monk, it is okay to use a messenger. So, like an example would be, like if there were a case of sexual misconduct, speaking to some other trusted senior monk about it, if it seemed unsafe to speak to that monk who's possibly a perpetrator, that's perfectly okay, perfectly acceptable to do it that way.
Yeah, I just had a couple of things to that. So another useful thing is that if you observe something that you think of as misconduct, sometimes it's useful to consult other monks about it, but don't necessarily name the name of the monk that you've observed, but just say in general terms, like, if I observe a monk acting in such and such a way, is this a problem? And so asking in that generalized way to several different monastics, you might get a better understanding of things. You might start to realize that a behavior which you thought was problematic is maybe not such a problem after all. Or other monastics might say, oh yeah, that is an issue, but they'll get over it eventually, or that's a common issue that monks go through in the early stages of practice, or so on. Or they might actually say, yeah, that's a big problem, and they might give you some advice about how to handle it. And if the monk who's displaying bad behavior, if they are in training under a senior monk, you can also go to their teacher. Go to that monk's teacher and tell them, I've observed such and such behavior. How should I respond to this? How should I handle this? And usually that senior monk, well, usually, one, they already know about the behavior, and two, they already have a system in mind for training the monk's behavior, and three, they'll probably tell you to stay out of it because they're already on top of it. But sometimes you actually will bring to their attention something that's useful for them to know, and that then the senior monk can handle in their own way. If you do go through that approach, then I would recommend, once you've spoken to the senior monk, then drop it. At that point, it's not your affair anymore. It's for the senior monk to decide how they're going to best train their disciples. Okay. And Ryan says, what is your view on archaic Buddhism? I've begun looking into the Anagarika. Is this research valuable for our attaining of wisdom liberation? Archaic Buddhism? So there was...
This is the earliest stratus of the EBTs, so
Oh.
the Anagarika is part of the Sutta Nipata, and it's
Okay.
considered to be quite old. And it is different in some ways in that emphasis than what you see in the later text. Meaning the mainstream of the text, like the middle-length discourses or the long discourses and so forth, has got quite a different flavor than the Anagarika. I believe that those early texts are really useful and really inspiring and very beneficial. And you will see, when you see the points of commonality between the Anagarika and some of the other suttas, it's also very useful.
Okay, and Rick says, chronic illness has gotten to the point where when I really exert myself, it brings my mind to a temporary breaking point. I've developed a resistance to pushing myself in practice. Any suggestions? Maybe relax a bit more then. Maybe don't push yourself so hard. I've met a lot of people over the years who push themselves much harder than it's actually necessary to. It depends on different people's personalities and temperaments, but my observation has been that most people really just need to relax and pay attention. You don't actually need to push yourself. It's more about allowing the mind to stop doing all of its unnecessary activities. And so this idea that we need to push ourselves is sometimes just contributing to an inner agitation, inner disturbance. Now, of course, there are some people who are just prone to laziness and spacing out, and in that case, actually a little bit of pushing can be useful. But my experience has been that most people stay awake, pay attention, and relax. And that usually gets better results than trying to push yourself. Especially if you're already observing negative results from pushing yourself, then that's a pretty clear indication to stop pushing yourself. Relax a bit more. Okay, and Mo says, having practiced in both Mahayana and Theravada monasteries, so have I. I'm trying to navigate their key disagreement. Mahayana finds individual liberation insufficient, while Theravada questions Mahayana's emphasis on liberating all beings. I'm unsure how to respond to this contradiction. Don't respond to it. The contradiction is surface level. As you practice more deeply, it will stop being an issue. Most of the problems that arise between Theravada and Mahayana just come from a lack of deep understanding. So I wouldn't make a problem out of it personally. The truth is that Theravada people are practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, and Mahayana people are practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. And ultimately, the Noble Eightfold Path leads to liberation. And the question of individual liberation versus group liberation is only relevant to unenlightened people. It's just not relevant. If you just practice the Eightfold Path, then you'll make progress towards awakening. That's all you need to know. Okay, and Joe says, would you kindly share a recent act of witness you are grateful to have received or witnessed? Any recollections in particular gladdening your heart minds recently? Anything come to mind?
I'm particularly grateful to Bhante Sudaso because there's a certain feature which is both strict and open-minded. So if I make any small mistakes as a result of being a newbie at this particular community, I noticed that Bhante refrains completely from poking me about my mistakes, and so that restraint of just like unnecessary interactions, creating a spaciousness where each individual part of the community has got the room to discover their own path to liberation, even though we're all together in the same monastery. Each one of us has got to find their own way forward, and you can't do it if there's too much impingement. So that freedom, still within the context of being a strict Theravada monastery, is something for which I'm grateful.
You're very kind. Okay, so let's see. So Mo says, my chronic health issues have sometimes led to preoccupation, yet I feel a strong call to monastic life. I am now shifting my practice to focus on the body's impermanence rather than seeking a fixed state of health. Is this letting go of intense bodily concern a responsible approach for my path, or is it neglectful? I mean, it's difficult to say for sure because I'm not in your body. So we do still need to make some effort to keep our body healthy and functional, because our body is actually a useful tool for doing Buddhist practice. If you don't take care of your body and you start going blind and frail, then it's actually really difficult to practice well. On the other hand, it's just the nature of the body that as time goes by, it gets increasingly frail. So you also need to Train yourself to be okay with that. So we do want to make some effort to take care of the body, but not to be obsessed with physical health. And we want to have the wise recognition that loss of health is completely normal and natural and inevitable. So again, I don't know you and I don't know your situation, so I don't know if you're too fixated on your health. So that's something you need to look at for yourself. And again, if you're interested in monastic life, just start spending time at monasteries. That's the best way to find out if you actually do want to become a monastic. And most people don't. So most people who think they want to become monks, they really don't. And spending time at monasteries will help clarify that for you. And that's the last question, so I think we can go ahead and conclude at this point. So thank you for all your wonderful questions, and we'll wrap up at this point with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.